this is month Kartik, and later on in the middle of November, I'm going to be with devotees, virtual visit to Vrindavan. We had a plan to have a yatra in Vrindavan, and Mr. COVID had a different idea. So we adjusted according to his idea, and it's going to be a virtual visit to Vrindavan. And what we're doing this morning is a warm-up. It's giving me an opportunity to go through all the topics and the nice visuals and everything. So I'll be ready by this a practice session. So we're at the beginning for the first 8 of something like 18 classes that I'll be conducting will be at Radha Kunda. One of the reasons for selecting Radha Kunda is at Radha Kunda, it's not possible to take a big group. Too congested. So it's a virtual visit to Radha Kunda. And we're going down shortly of where we're going. And this is going to be a little introduction to the whole topic. We'll start introduction to the topic. There's a very nice verse from Lalita Madhava. We spoke about Lalita Madhava yesterday by Rupa Goswami. Towards the end of the entire Lalita Madhava, Radha makes this request of Krishna. Please grant this one benediction for those persons who reside in the profoundly sweet land of Vrindavan and who for a long time yearn with a steady heart to someday attain you. Please, O Master of Gokula, appear before their eyes as their youthful friend. Krishna said, Priye tatastu, beloved, so be it. Beautiful painting, beautiful verse. It makes one want to reside in Vrindavan, but sometimes life takes us other places like Minneapolis and where other places. But we can hanker like that. 5 most potent activities in bhakti, and one of them is to reside in holy places. And if we can't reside in holy places, we can meditate on those holy places and the virtue of those holy places. So that's what we're doing, virtually. Here's a nice artist rendering of pond. Maybe it's Radha Kunda, doesn't say. Radha Kunda, Shama Kunda in Vrindavan. There's a very nice verse. I'll read. Having accepted the renounced order of life, my home is this Vrindavan forest. My bed is the soft dust of Vrindavan. The sky of Vrindavan is my blanket. And flowering creepers of Vrindavan are my only belongings. The moon over Vrindavan is the lamp of my hopes. And my chanting beads are counting the days until I meet the divine couple, Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. Beautiful. So since we're not so fortunate to reside in Vrindavan, meditate on Vrindavan, and specifically for this initial part of the virtual Vrindavan Yatra is Radha Kunda. Here's a very beautiful verse set of 8 verses, Ashtakam, by Rupa Goswami from Stavavali. At the final verse, you'll see the final verse. You'll see all 8 plus the final verse. Rupa Goswami prays to Sri Krishna to be satisfied with whoever nicely recites these 8 verses, and that he, Krishna, will fulfill all that the reciter's desire. That goes for those who hear it too. Just have to hear it nicely, and it's a knockout. It's really some devotees invested lots and lots of time and bhakti. And I think like that. It's one of my favorite activities here.
Jayantī Sancharannetralakshmi Vilasita Puraliji Kanjari Tasya Khela Hidaya Madhupamali Shasuno Akhila Guna Kabira Radhika Marchayami I worship Sri Radhika, who with the splendid beauty of her restless eyes plays as a kanjana, a wag-tailed bird turning to every direction. Who is the mali flower that attracts the bumblebee of the Prince of Raja's heart, and who's deeply filled with all transcendental virtues. Pituriha Vrishabhano Ranmaya Prashastim Jagati Kila Samaste Sushtu Viskarayanti Rajanipati Kumaram Khelayanti Sakhibhi Surabhini Nija Kunde Radhika Marchayami I worship Sri Radhika, who spreads the fame of her father, Vrishabhanu Maharaj, throughout the world, and who plays with her girlfriends and the Prince of Raja in her own beautiful and fragrant pond. Worship Sri Radhika, whose smiling, submissive face is initiated in a vow to subdue the glories of the full autumnal moon, the Lord of the Lilies, whose erotic pastimes are expanded by Krishna's naughty sidelong glances, and who wears waves of elegance on her body.
Radha Kunda Milcha Prashastim Madhuri Pukhavinda Raga Radha Malaka Mola Radhika
I worship Sri Radhika, whose braided hair, which is filled with various kinds of blooming flowers, resembles the spread out tail of a peacock that is dizzy of amorous feelings, and whose spotless cheeks are colored red with the pan that emanated from Krishna's mouth.
Lalitanta Sriha Siktantaranga Akila Vidha Vishakha Satya Vidya Shila Drita Madhura Vinodam Radhika Chayami
I worship Sri Radhika, whose heart is sprinkled by pure, intimate affection for Lalita, whose all-round mood of friendship for Vishaka is well known. Who is a box filled with priceless jewels of love for Krishna, and who is sweetly playful.
Atula Mahashivrinda Ranyaraji Vijayata Nikhila Samaya Bhartu Kartikasya Devi Aparimita Mukunda Presi Vrinda Mukhya Jagadagara Kirtin Radhika
I worship Sri Radhika, who was crowned with a ceremonial bathing as the queen of incomparably glorious Vrindavan, who is the presiding goddess of the Kartika month, which is the best time of the year, who is the chief of all the innumerable dear gopis of Mukunda, and whose fame destroys all the sins of the world.
हरिपदनखकोटि पृष्ठपर्यन्तसीमा तटमपि कलयन्तीं राधकोटेरभीष्टम् मुदितमतिरात्रि वृन्दवैरव्यनीता गुरुमति गुरुकीर्तिं
I worship Sri Radhika, who looks upon even the backs of the extreme borders of Hari's toenails as being dearer to her than millions of hearts. Who is the Guru who initiates all the joyful, restless-eyed girls in the art of cleverness, and whose glories are great.
मधुरी मलारी संपरीता किशोरी हरिपुज परिरम्भां लङ्करोमाञ्चपालिं स्फुरदरुणदुकूलां राधिकामर्चयामि
I worship Sri Radhika, whose luster is of pure gold, like vermilion crushed on a golden slab, whose adolescent beauty is surrounded by waves of sweetness, who gets goose pimples of ecstasy when she is embraced by Hari's arm, and who wears a bright crimson dress.
परिपठति वरिष्ठं सुष्ठुराधाष्टकं यः महिमकिरणपुत्री कुलकल्याणचन्द्रा स्फुटमखिलमभीष्टं तस्य तुष्टस्तनोति
The moon of auspiciousness on the bank of the daughter of the sun, Yamuna, Shri Krishna Chandra will be satisfied with whoever nicely recites this best of prayers, Radhashtakam. That is a spotless reservoir of erotic sweetness, and he will fulfill all the reciter's desires.
Ladies that worked on this, as well as their musician, I'm sure had an ecstatic time. This is a continuation of where I left off yesterday, or day before yesterday. We're going around Radha Kunda visiting places, and the conclusion of the previous class was visiting the temple of Radha Gopinath and sitting place of Mother Janava Baitak. Those of you that have been to Radha Kunda know where that place is. And in the same hall is the Samadhi of Raghunath Goswami. So we'll see some nice images. A picture in your mind, if you've been there, going around Radha Kund, we haven't come to Shama Kund yet, and on the right side, facing Radha Kund, is Gopinath Temple. And in that same hall is Raghunath Das Goswami's Samadhi. There you see it on the left side. There's a closer image. And there's what's inside is the actual Samadhi itself. And there's a nice painting, Raghunath Das Goswami. We heard already about the deities of Radha Krishna, of Raghunath. We heard about his life. And he lived in Vrindavan for a number of years, close to 50 years, by the side of Radha Kunda. And he left this world at Radha Kunda, and this is his Samadhi. Now let's go inside with the camera at least. On the wall, there's a sitting place, and then there's a painting that you'll see a close-up of. That little story behind the painting. It just gives us some idea of the intensity of absorption of Raghunath Das Goswami. Here's a sitting place. Now before he had a sitting place, he would just sit by the side of Radha Kunda. And the painting shown here, which is in front of his sitting place, it's also up on the wall, we'll describe shortly. And then here's the Samadhi. So the painting shows two events in one painting. One of those events is on the right side, you see two tigers, lions, I don't know which is an appropriate term. And he was so absorbed in chanting the holy name that he didn't even notice So just give you some idea. Also, at the time of the Goswamis, it didn't look like it looks today. It was kind of a jungle. So they came to drink some water right next to him. They didn't bother him, and he didn't even notice that they were there. But standing at a distance, over on the left side, you see Sanatana Goswami, and he watched. And when they left, he approached Raghunath and scolded him, saying, "You're so absorbed in the chanting of the holy name, you're risking your life unnecessarily. How many times do I have to make this request of you? Please build Bhajan Kutir, and then this kind of difficulty won't come." And Raghunath said, yes, he did too. You know that one, right? Some time passed, and again, as the middle part of the painting shows, it was midday in the summer in Vrindavan. And those of you that have been or have known persons who have been to Vrindavan in the summer, it's too hot. And it was so hot that his body was baking. So Srimati Radharani came, covered him from the heat of the sun with her upper garment until the heat of the sun changed, and when the heat of the sun diminished, she withdrew her garment. Here's the painting, close up, and she went away. Now this is a similar painting. It shows a pool of perspiration coming from Radharani's body as she's blocking the sun. And in the background, there's Sanatana Goswami observing the whole thing, observing Radharani serving the baked body. Look at this painting, his body is all sunburned. Raghunath Das. When Radharani left, he again came and scolded. We're here to serve Radharani, and you're taking a service from Radharani because you're so renounced. What kind of renunciation is this? Please make an arrangement for Bhajan Kutir. So finally he did. We'll visit that place shortly. Another nice painting of the same. Radharani covering the body of Raghunath Das. Because his chanting was with such absorption. He was completely detached from worldly everything, anything. Across the street from this Gopinath temple, there's a temple of Lord Shiva. You see a little red arrow. On the left side is where the Shiva Linga is. And shortly you're going to see at the center door. No, look at the painting. Is it possible to make this full screen instead of showing E on the left? Just, is it the way to do that? No, not from the projector, from your computer. You know how to? Bhakti Dari can explain to you how to do that. So here's the center door. He, Lord Shiva, is protecting the footprints of Srimati Radharani. So that's the end of that particular set of slides. We're going to go to the next place from Gopinath Temple. And the next place from the Gopinath Temple is where Gopal Bhatta Goswami kept a Bhajan Kutir. There's a verse written by Gopal Bhatta. There we go. O Sri Radhe, you are the queen of the heart of Govinda. Please engage me in your service. This is the contemplation of Gopal Bhatta, specific to Srimati Radharani. So we're going to visit this place, the Radharaman Temple. It's by the same name. It's not the same Radharaman that he worshipped in Vrindavan. And here's the courtyard. And inside the courtyard is his nice temple. And inside the temple, here's the deities. You see on our right side, or the deity's altar, is Revati Balaram. And on our left side is Radharaman, or Radharaman. Not at the same place, but a little bit distant, is the Bhajan Kutir of Gopal Bhatta Goswami. And this is how he lived. Very simple. Very, very simple. Very, very simple. One of his initiated disciples was Srinivasacharya. He visited Srinivasacharya's place. Srinivasacharya wrote a poem, or some words of praise, Gopal Bhatta, addressing him as Gunamanjari. And a teenager, Hare Krishna teenager, made this painting. She grew up in America, but her parents moved to Vrindavan. She now lives in Vrinda. And she's painted a painting of Gunamanjari, and as you can see in Gunamanjari's hand is Radharaman. So here's Srinivasacharya's prayer. O Gunamanjari, the embodiment of divine love, please listen to my prayer. As I ponder upon your countless qualities, my mind simply becomes enchanted by you. Seeing me as a distressed soul, please constantly bestow your mercy upon me. I find it's quite amazing that Srinivasacharya, was seeing Gopal Bhatta in terms of his identity with Krishna, within Krishna Lila. Due to your own magnanimous nature, please fulfill my desire. Besides you, who, like the water-laden cloud of the monsoon, will quench my thirst, you are undoubtedly the hope for the hopeless. In my heart, I'm completely convinced about that. I beg you to kindly look upon me with your tender eyes, shining with sympathy. Srinivasacharya is a very, very important person, following Lord Chaitanya, Rupa and Sanatan, following Rupa, Sanatan, Jiva Goswami. Following Jiva Goswami is Srinivasacharya. In the line of disciplic succession, amongst those trained by Jiva Goswami, he was superlative. At least in our disciplic line, identified by Bhaktisiddhanta, he's the successor. So a very important person, and his spiritual master was Gopal Bhatta Goswami, and we can see how he had deep feelings of attachment and affection for Gopal Bhatta Goswami, and even specifically here he's addressing him as Gunamanjari. A little bit about Gopal Bhatta's life. He was born in Srirangam, as you know. There's a very nice photo of the deity in Sri Ranganath. And his father was the chief priest, or one of the chief priests of Srirangam. So he grew up having access to all the details of deity worship that the Sri Vaishnavas engage in. We'll see shortly some of the books that he wrote, which are details of how to engage in deity worship. And of course he had access to their library. Now, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as we know, when he took sannyas, he traveled to South India after going to Puri. And here's a nice painting in one of their temples, where on the left is Lord Chaitanya giving teachings, and in the front there's little Gopal, along with others who are hearing from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gopal Bhatta was 10 years old when Mahaprabhu visited. He remained in Sri Rangam for a total of 30 years, and for a total of 45 years he resided in Vrindavan. Now, the celebrated story or narration about Gopal Bhatta's time with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Sri Rangam. He stayed for the 4 months of the rainy season. Every day, little Gopal affectionately did whatever service Lord Chaitanya would give him, and he would sit and hear his teachings. And he received his blessings. He wanted to go with Lord Chaitanya after the end of the rainy season. And Lord Chaitanya instructed, you stay here, serve your parents until they give you permission to go or to depart. So that's what he did. He followed Lord Chaitanya's instruction, but his affection, he had already received his mercy, and his attachment to Lord Chaitanya became very, very profound. We'll see as we go along. But he was bound by the instruction as a faithful young boy, and for another 20 years remained in Sri Rangam. The indication from his parents, by this time Lord Chaitanya had left the world, and so he was sent by his parents to be under the shelter of Rupa and Sanatan. So that's what happened. He went to Vrindavan, took shelter of Rupa and Sanatan. They gave him a place to stay near Nidhivan. It's one of the places in Vrindavan where Krishna would perform rasa dance. It's still there, walled in, and it's a very sacred place. So that was where his residence was given, a little remote from where all the other Goswamis were residing. But he was very, very happy. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared to him in a dream after his departure, instructing Gopal to diminish your, or minimize your sorrow. If you want my darshan, then make a trip to Nepal. So this is a photograph of the Gandaki River. And when he went to take his bath in Gandaki River, the celebrated event, there's different versions of the event, but he had a container for doing his bathing. And as he dipped the container for doing his bathing into the water, some shalagram shilas were in the container. So he emptied them out, and then it happened 2 more times. And so he understood it's meant to be this. They want to be worshipped by me somehow. And so he returned to Vrindavan with 12 shilas. This is one of those classic paintings of Gopal Bhatta, who, having the training that he had in his childhood, he was very naturally absorbed in deity worship. And after some time, another very special event took place. In Vrindavan, there was a rich merchant, and he was bestowing paraphernalia for the worship of the other Goswami's deities, with ornaments and garments and so forth. And he then visited Gopal Bhatta Goswami and made the same offer to him. Gopal Bhatta said, well, I have just shilas, so I can't use all these items. And the man insisted, so he accepted them, put them to the side, and then began having a desire a spiritual desire that it would be very nice. There was a form of Krishna that he could worship. A form of Krishna that he could worship. And he just went to put his deities to rest that evening with that thought in his mind. They were placed in a wicker basket, and he went to do his morning bathing and so forth, and came back and opened the wicker basket to start his worship, and he could only find 11 Shilas. And over to the side was Shila number 12. And it was a self-manifesting deity of Radharaman. So the appearance day is one day after Nrsimha Chaturdasi, or on the Purnima. So they have a big festival at the Radharaman temple for the appearance day of Radharaman. The celebrated next event, he informed Rupa and Sanatan what happened. And they were jubilant. And they came to see, and for the celebrated statement, this form of Radharaman is exactly like Krishna. Different deities, their face looks like Krishna, their torso looks like Krishna, or their leg looks like Krishna, but Radharaman is the perfect image of the form of Krishna. So he became celebrated in that way, in addition to a veritable self-manifesting deity. There's a black and white photo of the deity with some nice impressions of his features. Some time passed. Some years passed. And one day, a young brahmachari came after Gopal Bhatta was finished with his puja. He was very patient. The brahmachari waited. And he asked if he could have his audience. He said, sure. Who are you? What's your name? My name is Gopinath. And, well, why'd you come here? And he said, long ago, my hometown is Saharanapur, near Haridwar. You were on pilgrimage to Haridwar, and it was a very heavy rainy day, and you stayed at my father's home because taking shelter from the rain. And in the course of the discussions with my father, you were up all the evening. My father, before your departure, made one request. Please give your blessing that I may have a son. And Gopal Bhatta gave his blessing that he would have a son. And his father said, my first son, I will see that he comes to serve you. And Gopal Bhatta had forgotten that exchange, but the father of Gopinath did not. And so when he was just a young man, he sent Gopinath to serve Gopal Bhatta. Now my understanding is the Goswamis in the line of Gopal Bhatta that take care of the deity worship, Radharaman, it's not his seminal children or descendants because he wasn't married. But it's Gopinath Pujari and his descendants and descendants of his descendants, etc., became the worshippers of Radharaman and the Goswamis of the Radharaman temple. Here's a close-up of the face of Radharaman, and even a closer close-up of his face. With you can see details, and in this close-up you maybe can even see some teeth. He has teeth and fingernails and very, very, very refined features. And of course, he appeared because of love of Gopal Bhatta. And Gopal Bhatta loved him, and he loved Gopal Bhatta. There's some history that there were some doubting scientists. They wanted to examine if the deity is really a self-manifesting deity. So, with the permission and under the supervision of the pujaris, they carefully examined the deity and found no evidence of carving. And I've not seen, but I know some devotees who have seen, the backside of Radharaman is the Shila from which Radharaman was manifest. It's kind of a round, bulging part. And then Radharaman came out of the deity. Now we hear stories about self-manifesting deities, and, maybe not, but I have my doubts with Radharaman. Very beautiful deity. There's no installation of a Shalagram Shila. Because Shalagram is Krishna or Narayana. And in this particular feature, due to the love of Gopal Bhatta, Radharaman. And that means there needs to be a Radha by the side of Radharaman. So here's a photograph of a crown with a canopy above the crown. And that crown is Radha, or represents Radha. And then there's Radharaman. Some time ago, Padmanabha Goswami, who is the current in the line of Goswamis, son of Vishvambar Goswami, who has helped Prabhupada so much, and etc., loved Prabhupada very much. So Padmanabha Goswami was making a tour in America, and he was doing a slideshow presentation, a little bit like this, and describing almost every day of the entire year, there's some special festival commemorating something, the pastime of Krishna, and the deity is dressed in a particular conventional way per year, with a certain color and a certain everything, according to the time of the year. He's very photogenic, Radharaman. And the pujaris are very soft. They're strict, but they're very soft and very kind to all the people who come. So here's just some nice photographs of Radharaman. Here's a close-up. Now there was an event in Gopal Bhatta's life where he was feeling another emotion about Krishna. And the other emotion about Krishna was he was feeling uncomfortable that he was worshipping Krishna without worshipping Lord Chaitanya. Because Krishna is to be worshipped with Lord Chaitanya. So, not in his dream, but directly in front of him, as he was worshipping Radharaman, a form of Gaurasundar appeared. And in his dream, actually the night before, I will appear in the form of the deity from time to time, so you don't need to feel separation from me, or that you're worshipping Krishna without me. That you can see very, very intimate relationship between the deity and Gopal Bhatta. This is the primary thing that's known about him. In addition, he had some important disciples, Srinivasacharya being one of them, and Gopinath Pujari being another one. He wrote several books. His mood, in general, was to be in the background. He didn't want prominence. You know this. When Krishnadas Kaviraj was making visits to various places, when he visited Gopal Bhatta for his permission, blessings to write before commencing, he said yes, on one condition. Don't mention my name. So we don't find his name mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita, although he's such an important member of the associates of Lord Chaitanya. And similarly, there's a similar discussion about Sanatan Goswami in Hari Bhakti Vilas. His name is not mentioned in Hari Bhakti Vilas. Or in the literature of Jiva Goswami, the Sandarbhas, his name is not mentioned. It's his mood. He was wanting to be in the background. He wrote, we'll see shortly, he wrote a preface, and it is said that when he was a young man, before coming to Vrindavan, he studied very carefully. Some of you know some devotees that study very carefully. And during that time, there were no computers. So he kept careful notes. And he made, in those careful notes, details and details and details and details of the topics of the Bhagavatam with references from the Bhagavatam and confirmation from scriptures. Now he is in the Sri Sampradaya, but his heart is with Lord Chaitanya. So when he went to Vrindavan, he gave all those notes to Jiva Goswami and asked him to assemble them in a publishable form. So the outline was there, the details were there, and they were nicely organized and further developed by Jiva Goswami. There's 4 books that are known that he was involved with directly. This is Shat Kriya Sara Deepika. It's a book about rituals, which part of which comes into Hari Bhakti Vilas, but it was a basis from which Hari Bhakti Vilas was written. He edited Hari Bhakti Vilas. He wrote a foreword to the Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami, and separately he wrote a commentary on Krishna Karnamrita by Bilbamangala Thakur. It's a very elevated literature, very much loved by Lord Chaitanya, and Gopal Bhatta wrote commentary. And this is a photograph of his samadhi, which is found in Vrindavan town. So we just visited a small temple that he and his bhajan kutir by the side of Radha Kunda. So next, we're visiting Radha Kunda. We're speaking about the personalities, but it gives us an indication, as exalted as these persons were, spiritually, they were very attached to Radharani and very attached to Radha Kunda, because Radha Kunda and Radharani are non-different. So the next place going around is the temple of Rupa Goswami. There's the entrance to the temple of Rupa Goswami. There's a gate there, but you can get in the gate. And inside the gate, there's Radha Govinda. And Radha Govinda, of course, were the worshipable deities of Rupa Goswami. So there on the left is a painting of Rupa Goswami, and on the right is a photograph of Radha Govinda found. They're very, very nicely decorated, very large deities found at Radha Kunda. And there we see the dates of Raghunath Das Goswami, 1489 to 1558. This is in Western calculation. So most of the Goswamis, they lived a long life. Although they lived very, very austerely long. Who is Rupa Goswami in Krishna Lila? Rupa Manjari. In Goloka Vrindavan, Srimati Radharani is lovingly served by 8 principal gopis, of whom Lalita Saki is her dearest friend. These intimate maidservants of Srimati Radhika are assisted by 8 main manjaris, with Sri Rupa Manjari being the leader. They please the sweet divine couple by carrying messages, preparing tasty beverages, stringing fragrant flower garlands, offering betel nuts, decorating the kunjas, fanning, etc. So that's Vrinda Devi, and this painting is showing Sri Rupa Manjari directly consoling Radharani in a particular circumstance. There's the verse that's connected with this painting is related. It's from a poem or a little verse written about Radharani's anxiety prior to her first meeting with Krishna. And Radharani's feeling shy. And Rupa Manjari is consoling her. Give up the shyness. I know your heart. And if you want the topmost thing in your life is to be with Krishna. So give up the shyness and go to him without any reservation. There's a very nice verse written by Kavi Karnapur in Chaitanya Chandrodaya Nataka. Nataka means it's a drama. Very nice verse. Srila Rupa Goswami, whose dear friend was Swarup Damodar, Rupa Goswami was the exact replica of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he was very, very dear to the Lord. Being the embodiment of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's ecstatic love, Rupa Goswami was naturally very beautiful. He very carefully followed the principles enunciated by the Lord, and he was a competent person to explain properly the pastimes of Lord Krishna. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu expanded his mercy to Srila Rupa Goswami just so he could render service by writing transcendental literatures. Very appropriate glorification of Rupa Goswami. But let us go now to a little bit of the history of his life. There's books written about the history of his life, so we'll just go quickly. He, Rupa Goswami, and Sanatan Goswami, and their brother Anupam, or Vallabha, were born in Saraswat Brahmin families, and there's this genealogy that's traced from Karnataka. And the description goes, there was some family quarrel, and so their predecessor family members shifted from Karnataka and gradually over several generations, ending up in the northern part of India in Ramakeli. When they were living in Ramakeli, there was a Pathan ruler, Nawab Hussain Shah, who conscripted them. He basically blackmailed them into his service because he was a smart man, a good, very, very good ruler or leader, and he understood Rupa and Sanatan and their brother are so much respected by all the Hindu community and the Vaishnavas that if they assist me, then everyone's going to be very peaceful. So he called for them. And when they came, he let them know, here's an offer. The offer is you assist me in my government, and here's the services you can do for me. And if you don't, I'll torment and torture and kill the Vaishnavas throughout the land. Think about it. Let me know what your decision is. So they didn't want to. They didn't want to do either. But the reason that they accepted was the protection of the Vaishnavas. So they became involved in his government. And we'll hear some more about what their services were. They didn't like it. They received enormous fortune. The king, wanted them to stay, so he gave them vast amounts of wealth and land. And they used the wealth and the place where they resided to make a second Vrindavan. A Govardhan Hill and a Jamuna River and a place of Krishna's pastimes, and brahmanas that would tell the history and the pastimes of Krishna, etc. They continued in their Vaishnava activities, but they did their worldly duties also. But they didn't like it. And they came to know about Lord Chaitanya. So they sent messengers to Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya didn't respond to those messages. But they continued to send messages. As a trusted brahmana would carry the message. So Lord Chaitanya finally sent a reply. And his reply is recorded like this. Become just like a wife who is attached to another man and will perform her worldly duties to her husband very nicely so he doesn't suspect. But in her mind, she will always be thinking of the other man, waiting for the chance to meet him. The paramour story. So they understood what he meant. It was purposefully a little enigmatic, a little puzzling, but they understood it and stay engaged in your service, and in time you will meet. We will meet. So Lord Chaitanya arranged the meeting. In the pretext of going to Vrindavan, it was his intention to go to Vrindavan, but he went a very different direction. I mean, you know your geography. From Puri to Vrindavan is north and mainly west, but he went practically north and a little bit east to visit his mother and to visit the three brothers actually. Now, there's a little section I want to read. That 8 to come. Well, they came anyway, just to see the two of you. No one can know my purpose. And so people ask me why I've come to this village of Ramakeli. I'm very glad you've come to see me. Now you can go home. Do not fear anything. You have been my service in life, so Krishna will deliver you soon. Now Chaitanya Charitamrita, they spoke to Lord Chaitanya in words that when he returned to Puri, before going to Vrindavan, he was meditating on their words and their mood. Yeah, this is a detail for detail. When Lord Chaitanya came, he came with many followers, too many. And so Nawab Hussain Shah got nervous. Maybe he's going to do something. Maybe, politically he is astute. So maybe there's some risk. So he consulted one of his spies and ministers named Keshava Khatri, who said, no worries, he's just a mendicant, he's on his way to Vrindavan, and you don't need to bother. To double check, Nawab Hussain Shah called Rupa Goswami. The title, he was this Dabir Khas, is a title given to someone who's a personal secretary. So he called his personal secretary, "What's the story?" And Rupa Goswami spoke in such a way, similarly minimizing, because Nawab was smart, he was also very, very cruel. So they didn't go see, they're writing letters. They wanted to see Lord Chaitanya, but they didn't go during the daytime, they went at night. And when they went at night, they expressed themselves, as you see, falling at his feet in full submission. And their words of humility stuck in Lord Chaitanya's heart and mind. Here's from Chaitanya Charitamrita. We are millions of times more degraded, fallen, and sinful than Jagai and Madai. We are of wicked birth because we are the servants of Muslims, and our activities are exactly like those of the Muslims. We constantly associate with people who are inimical toward the cows and Brahmins. Due to our abominable activities, we are now bound by the neck and hands and have been thrown into a ditch filled with the excrement of evil sense enjoyment. They wanted deliverance. And then this instruction, Chaitanya. Then in this exchange, there's another celebrated event, that is Sanatana Goswami, being the chief minister, and by his disposition as well as his title, I find it pretty amazing. He gave advice to Lord Chaitanya. I mean, you have to be an elevated person to know when is it appropriate to give advice and how. And he gave advice. As much as we wish for you to stay, please don't stay, because Nawab is a very dangerous person. He can do anything at any time. So right now he's like peaceful. At any time you could be at risk. So we don't advise that you stay. Then the second was, you have thousands of people, and people will ridicule you for entering in this manner. So go with one or a small number of followers or assistants, but don't go like this. It's said in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya thought about his words, changed his plan. Now, it may have been his plan just to give him some service to making that recommendation, but that's how it's described, Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he returned to Puri with all of his followers. So they were safely back with their families, saying, "I couldn't leave without the blessings of Gadadhar Pandit. So Gadadhar Pandit, please." He fell at his feet, okay, asked me for blessings. So Lord Chaitanya left a second time, one served. And on his way back from Vrindavan, because Rupa Goswami was trying to find out, he had escaped from the government service and entrusted some of his wealth with a local grocer, and told Sanatana Goswami, as he stayed on, Vallabha and Rupa left. And he was sending messages, where is Lord Chaitanya now? When is he going to Vrindavan? So he found out that he had already reached Vrindavan. And so he went directly to Prayag. And for 10 days, Lord Chaitanya instructed Rupa Goswami, Prayag. This section is celebrated. It's called Sri Rupa Shiksha. 10 days of teachings. So he assimilated a lot, 10 days. I mean, later, Rupa Goswami meets Lord Chaitanya in Puri, and it was for several months. We'll hear shortly. This is a little summary, quick summary, of what we find in Chaitanya Charitamrita, their exchanges in Prayag. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught Rupa Goswami the ultimate limit of the truth about Lord Krishna, the truth about devotional service, and the truth about transcendental mellows, culminating in conjugal love between Radha and Krishna. Finally, he told Rupa Goswami about the ultimate conclusions of Srimad Bhagavatam. That's a lot. Prabhupada. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught Rupa Goswami all the conclusions he had heard from Ramananda Roy and duly empowered him so that he could understand them. It's one thing hearing, it's another thing understanding. He was empowered to understand it. By entering the heart of Rupa Goswami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu empowered him to ascertain the conclusions of all truths. How'd you like that? He made him an experienced devotee whose decisions correctly agreed with the verdicts of the disciplic succession. Thus, Sri Rupa Goswami was personally empowered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And at the end, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had to leave. Rupa Goswami wanted to go with him. Lord Chaitanya said, no. Your duty is to carry out my order. Later you can go from Vrindavan to Jagannath Puri through Bengal. There you will meet me again. So, nice painting. Rupa Goswami fainted by the side of the river. And he followed Lord Chaitanya's instruction, at least for a short while. He and Vallabha, his brother, or Anupam is also known, he spent 1 month in Vrindavan and then turned around, went to Puri. But Anupam, on the way along the bank of the river Ganges, he died. And we heard about how that affected his son, Jiva Goswami. And then for 10 months, he's in Puri with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So later in the same chapter 19 of Madhya Lila, indeed, Srila Rupa Goswami, whose dear friend was Swarup Damodar, was the exact replica of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We read this word. He very carefully followed the principles enunciated by the Lord, and he was a competent person to explain properly the pastimes of Lord Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu expanded his mercy to Rupa Goswami just so he could render service by writing transcendental literatures. So this was explicitly the reason for empowering him, and he is explicitly what he did because he understood that was his service. Now there's two situations, explicit situations in Chaitanya Charitamrita where Lord Chaitanya confirmed what Krishnadas Kaviraj is saying, his empowering. In ecstasy, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recited a verse when dancing in front of Lord Jagannath. Almost no one could understand the meaning of that verse. But Rupa Goswami could understand the meaning of the verse. And he wrote a companion verse to indicate his understanding of the meaning of the verse. And when he was asked, how did he understand? Swarup Damodar said, it must be that you gave him your mercy. And Lord Chaitanya confirms, I was so pleased with Rupa Goswami that I embraced him and bestowed upon him all necessary potencies for preaching the bhakti cult. There's another passage from Chaitanya Charitamrita indicating that it's another confirmation from Lord Chaitanya. You know, he wrote this verse, as the companion verse to what Lord Chaitanya would sing, put it on a leaf, stuck it in the grass straw roof Lord Chaitanya came to meet him. He wasn't there. He saw it sticking out of the roof. He read it, and he was amazed. How did he understand? Again, I thereupon also bestowed upon him my transcendental potency to Swarup Damodar. Now you should also give him instructions, in particular, instruct him in transcendental mellows. So here we are. He remained for 10 months, receiving further instructions. And then he wrote. He went back to Vrindavan. That was one of his main services. Here's the opening verse of chapter 19 that's describing Rupa Goswami. Before the creation of this cosmic manifestation, the Lord enlightened the heart of Lord Brahma with the details of creation and manifested the Vedic knowledge in exactly the same way. The Lord, being anxious to revive the Vrindavan pastimes of Lord Krishna, impregnated the heart of Rupa Goswami with spiritual potency. Whew. By this potency, Srila Rupa Goswami could revive the activities of Krishna in Vrindavan, activities almost lost to memory. In this way, he spread Krishna consciousness throughout the world. It's almost 9 o'clock. I'll try to finish. By Bhakti Rasa, this is an understanding of what Rupa Goswami's realization. The spiritual world is an ocean of Bhakti Rasa. And so Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu. And it's by Bhakti Rasa one's dormant Krishna consciousness is awakened. There's a nice description of an example of how one of Rupa Goswami's books manifest. You recognize the painting. It's Lord Chaitanya seeing a sand dune along the shore of Puri, and instead of seeing a sand dune, he saw Govardhan Hill. So he went running like the wind with his arm outstretched to embrace Krishna, was by the side of Govardhan Hill. He fainted. We learn from the diary of Govinda, the personal servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that prior to returning to his unmanifest eternal pastimes, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu remained overwhelmed in highly inflamed mood of separation. At that time, Mahaprabhu's two intimate and eternal servitors, Swarup Damodar and Ramananda Roy, would try to pacify him by singing verses that were relevant to his mood. So, once Mahaprabhu was sitting with his devotees on the shore of the ocean, hearing Krishna Katha, seeing the dense grove of trees lining the shore of the ocean and the sand dunes, remembrance of Govardhan Hill and the Jamuna River with the many beautiful gardens and groves situated on her banks sprang up inside him. He then began weeping in separation from Krishna. When his excitement subsided and he became peaceful, he instructed the assembled devotees in a soft, sweet voice. Srila Rupa Goswami wrote Sri Upadesh Amrita verses based on these instructions. And Prabhupada's appreciation. Time. Here's something Prabhupada wrote in a purport, 111 Bhagavatam purport. Within the past 500 years, many erudite scholars and acharyas like Jiva Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Ballavacharya, his name is mentioned, and many other distinguished scholars, even after the time of Lord Chaitanya, made elaborate commentaries on the Bhagavatam, and the serious students would do well to attempt to go through them to better relish the transcendental messages. When we spend some time like that, 6-part or something like that visit of Govardhan Hill. There was a song or some ashtakam about Govardhan that we recited together, and a little recording just like this one, this beginning of this class, in the particular meter of an intoxicated peacock. The meter is called Mata Mayura, and just some appreciation. In the first verse, Mata Mayura is mentioned about the peacocks dancing around the side of Govardhan Hill. Rupa Goswami's artistic and poetic ability is fantastic. The celebrated painting is Rupa Goswami writing Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu underneath a kadamba tree. It is said when he wrote something sad, the leaves of the tree would fall. And he wrote something joyful, the leaves of the tree would manifest. It was very powerful. And he's, on this particular day, he's meditating on making some gift for his brother on his birthday, and down lane comes Radharani to make some sweet rice for his brother. When he gives the sweet rice to his brother, he finds it ambrosial and asks him, "Where'd you get this? The ingredient is really special." And he describes and said, "No, you've engaged me in taking service from Radharani. How is this?" He continued eating sweets given by Radharani. Here's his handwriting. It's when Lord Chaitanya saw his handwriting, he said, "This is like strings of pearls." Here's the Bhajan Kutir. That looks very different today because they've rearranged everything. And I have there's a painting in Jimmy's home where he's up on a ladder cleaning the rooftop when he was visiting Vrindavan. He has some practical service. Here's Rupa Goswami visiting Prabhupada in his rooms before he came to America. Very direct service, our connection with our ISKCON. Saying, "Maharaj, don't worry about anything. Go ahead and travel to the West. Just preach the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the chanting of Hare Krishna. You'll be successful, I guarantee, because I will be right with you all the time." So sure enough, Rupa Goswami, invested with all the power of Lord Chaitanya, empowered Srila Prabhupada. Here's again the deity of Radha Govinda at Radha Kunda. And you can see how nicely they're decorated and ornamented and so forth. Several other photographs. Very, very beautiful, very tall, very large. And then the original Radha Govinda that Rupa Goswami discovered. We don't have time to describe because it's 10 o'clock, it's 9 o'clock. You know the story. Here's the story real fast. It's not nice to say stories fast. Rupa Goswami was given service. One of those services, one of those main services was establish the places of Krishna's pastimes, which included the deities that he couldn't find. Govindaji, and he went searching and asking Brahmins and reading records and praying and this and that and couldn't find. So he was by the side of the Jamuna in great despair because he has a service he could fulfill. Small boy, who turned out to be Krishna, told him, "I know where. Why are you looking so sad? Well, I can't find. I know where Govindaji. Come with me." Took his hand. Took him to the place. He was on top of a hill where every evening, at the time of milking, one cow would come and pour milk. She was performing Abhishek. And in the morning, Rupa Goswami got some local people to help him excavate, dug down, and sure enough, there's Govindaji. Buried in the... So on top of that hill is where the temple was built. Later, we heard this already, by his side is Radharani, and that arrangement was made by Janava. long story which we narrated already. And there's a close-up of both Govindaji and Radharani. And the lotus feet of Govindaji. And a close-up of his face. In Jaipur. The original Govindaji found by and worshipped by Rupa Goswami and his associates. So we'll have to continue next time. When because of other classes, I have groups of people. But you're all invited to join the virtual Vrindavan Yatra. And see if there's any discussion. Sorry for having to go so fast. Part of the reason for not getting to finish was I wanted to play that little video of Rupa Goswami's Astakam. Really inspirational. Comments or questions? Little abrupt.
Maharaj, namaskar. My voice is Rupa. I have a question, Maharaj.
Could you turn the speaker towards me? Go ahead. I can hear you loud, too loud. Go ahead, speak. Can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Maharaj, I can hear you. My question is, Maharaj, as you mentioned, very nice class. Thank you so much for sharing all of these pastimes. And as you mentioned about the Gopal Bhatta Goswami, even though he was a great devotee and he was helping Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami to write the Charitamrita, but he didn't want to mention his name, and we have given many other examples. So normally we see this tendency of being recognized or praised or honored, a hankering for that kind of strong desire is there. The people we see, how to minimize that and how to handle that kind of desire. Maybe it is like we see somewhere it's lower degree and some cases very high. So how do we handle that kind of desire? Maharaj.
There's a teaching of Ramanujacharya I like very much. And the teaching of Ramanujacharya about this question you're asking is, if you want to develop a certain quality, one of the ways to develop that quality is to find personalities that exemplify that quality. Either they're around you, or they're in scripture, or they're whatever, like Gopal Bhatta you're appreciating in particular. For that matter, each of the 6 Goswamis was like that. I'll say it again. Each of the 6 Goswamis was like that. So, by speaking, remembering, hearing about, praising, absorbing your thought in the quality and character of such persons that don't have that interest to be recognized and so forth, that quality becomes your quality. By association with exemplary persons, such a quality becomes your quality. It happens naturally, it happens spiritually. So hear about, remember, glorify, read about, and it goes into your heart, and it becomes your quality. Their quality becomes your quality.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. You should have told me that at the beginning. Okay. ABC. Okay. Oh. So going back to something that was at the very beginning, being a resident in a sacred place is very spiritually beneficial and powerful. And even if one can't visit, one can't reside in a holy place, one can visit a holy place. And if one can't visit a holy place because of pandemic, then you can meditate on that holy place. And there's enormous spiritual benefit. I've been practicing full time, life as a renunciate for over 50 years, 53 years. And something that I started doing maybe 30 years ago is visiting holy places, because you're not living there, but you can visit. And when visiting holy places, it's not just take your camera and take pictures, but it's hear about the place. And in hearing about the place goes in. Even if one doesn't understand everything, etc., 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 there's spiritual potency in doing so. And it's been now, because of the pandemic, it's been several years where we wanted. I was being encouraged to go to so many other places. We went to Newark. Then, let's go to Ayodhya. So we went to Ayodhya. So when we go to Ayodhya, we go to Chitrakoot. Said, where's? I didn't know where Chitrakoot was. Chitrakoot. It's the place when Ram was in exile. The first place he and Lakshman and Sita went was Chitrakoot. 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 It's still in the jurisdiction of Ayodhya, but it's up on a mountain. It's very remote, and it's unspoiled. It's like the devotion is really amazing. You can feel it. And so, anyways, after that, let's go to. So we went to some other places. We went to not all over. We went to the places in South India, where Lord Chaitanya for 2 years traveled from Puri, going south, and visiting holy places. So we went to all those places. So that took 2 years. And then it's been a while. Let's go to Vrindavan. Let's go to Vrindavan. I said, we've been to Vrindavan so many times. Let's go to Vrindavan. Okay, let's go to. So it's been, because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to go. So I busied myself. It takes time to gather all these images and paintings of deities and everything. But it's there's spiritual potency, even for this young boy over here who's a little restless, naturally so. Your name is Krishna. Oh, little restless Krishna. Little restless. But even children, if they're not understanding everything, it's part of spiritual culture. Part of spiritual culture. Just like, those who are, brought up in America, and, the culture is a culture of no culture. But in India, the culture is from early age. Prabhupada said, about himself. When he was young, whenever there was a public gathering, guaranteed there would be recitation of something from Ramayana or Mahabharata. And, that's what here goes in. You hear it and you hear it. I find describing the names of the people in Ramayana, Western people are like tuned out. There's too many names. They tell me, I can't follow all this. My head's spinning. That's something else. But you hear it and hear it. The personalities emerge just from hearing. So these personalities that we've been discussing, they're personalities who are highly elevated spiritually and deeply devoted to Vrindavan and deeply devoted to Radharani. And so we're visiting Radha Kunda, which is Radharani's place. Radha Kunda. Not different than Radharani. And just hearing, even if one doesn't understand it, there's association with Radharani. I complimented, there are two ladies that did this recording of a Ashtaka of Radharani. I said, you two, one was the narrator, one was the singer. There were some musicians in the. Then you must from this, you must feel much closer to Radharani. Your hearts have become soft. They said yes. So that's what we're doing. And it may not be close to your heart yet to hear all these things. Just by hearing and by hearing, then the meaning and the sweetness starts to come out. The sweetness means a heart's hankering for what's on the other side of the veneer of this material existence. What's this higher purpose of life that we know exists, but not really sure how to get there? It just helps one become attracted to that higher standard of spiritual consciousness just by hearing, by sound vibration. Krishna's got a friend. Okay. So let us move on to the next thing to do today. That is for all of you. Let's wait for me. And thank you. Sad. Tomorrow morning, just I've been asked by a group of devotees that want to honor this month of Kartik by narrating Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. The time slot that was assigned to me was tomorrow morning. So tomorrow morning, promptly at 9 o'clock, our time, the India time is something else, is Krishna's liberating Kaliya. Pastime of Krishna in Vrindavan. Kaliya the serpent. So that's what we're doing tomorrow morning. Oh, it's a 7:30 program. I have to be at this. It's going to be globally, but 9 a.m. Oh, so I think we're going to have to cancel the 7:30 a.m. class here tomorrow because I have to do it. Oh, at whose place? Can we come to your place at 9 o'clock? Ah. It's okay. They got me on a leash and they're pulling. Yeah. Okay. 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock, you're home. And the topic is Kaliya. Okay. You're newer people? You know Krishna's pastimes are Vrindavan. So you know who Kaliya serpent is? No. Yes, no? Yes, okay. Lots of pictures, lots of very interesting. Here's a really interesting item out of the whole interesting things. Kaliya has an eternal position. He attained an eternal position with Krishna in Vrindavan. Krishna goes for rides on the Kaliya serpent in Vrindavan. It's said in the Puranas that sometimes, instead of a Krura coming to take Krishna from Vrindavan to Mathura, Kaliya comes down the Jamuna River, and Krishna goes on Kaliya to Mathura. That was a new one for me. I did that. He's actually, his heart, he had become very bad, but his heart wasn't bad. He had become bad by accumulation of bad association, etc. But he became freed from all of that by the dancing of Krishna on his hoods. So we'll hear about